and blessed to be with you, Kevin Miller in the morning at KIDO Talk Radio. Don't forget to get a hold of us on the KIDO Talk Radio app. Joined now by Mike Hammond, Gun Owners of America, Legislative Counsel. Mike, good to have you back.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Hello, Boise.
Yeah, we go back to New Hampshire, but, for folks that aren't familiar with you, and you always remind me of this, I'm thankful that you do, sir, you have quite a history involved in the state of Idaho.
I do. I worked for Jim McClure, who was the senior senator from Idaho from the 1970s. He was the chairman of the Senate Steering Committee, and I was general counsel to the United States Senate Steering Committee. After that, I worked for Senator Steve Symms, and one of the things I did for Symms was to draft what was called the Symms-Dixon Amendment. What it did was it rebuilt the Solidarity trade union in Poland, and Solidarity used the Symms-Dixon money to overthrow their communist government. And once that happened, the entire Soviet bloc collapsed. So arguably, your senator, Steve Symms, your former senator, played a significant role in the fall of the Soviet Union.
And yet, besides you, we've never heard that story. We always thought that Solidarity just did it on its own, but the funding came from Symms.
No, the funding came from the Symms-Dixon Amendment. We contributed like half of their funding from foreign sources. We were told back in about 87, they had an uprising at the beginning of the 80s, and about 87, Solidarity was telling us that they were cash-starved and were actually thinking of going out of business. So we said, how much money will it take? And when they told us, it was one of those Dr. Evil moments. It was chump change in Washington terms, and yet it was a huge amount of money for them. Amazing
how the world has changed since then, Mike.
Yeah, and amazing how a person like Jim McClure or Steve Symms can cause the world to change.
And yet we have that change going on today where we have these mass shootings and a lot of hysteria. What's the view from Gun Owners of America, sir?
Let's look at what happened. We had 3 mass shootings. All 3 of them, the shooters passed background checks. And yet we have the left running around saying, let's exploit these horrific tragedies in order to enact broadened background checks at the congressional level. Well, hold on a second. We had 3 tragedies. All 3 of them, they passed background checks. All 3 of them, background checks conspicuously failed to stop a tragedy. So why in heaven's name would expanding the same thing that failed in Gilroy, failed in El Paso, failed in Dayton, how in heaven's name could applying that in other situations suddenly be expected to be an acceptable reaction?
And yet we have everybody calling for this. And Mike, you're a conservative's conservative, so your view on what the president said initially about red flag laws, as you know, your time in the Gem State here, working with Senator Symms and others, people love their guns, not getting the reception that he probably thought in other places. Your thoughts on red flag laws and the president's statement, sir?
Well, first of all, if anyone doesn't know what red flag laws, they're these provisions which were drafted by the Giffords Organization. This language was drafted by the center of the anti-gun movement and is being pushed by them behind the scenes. But basically, a red flag law says that if you have an angry relative, and many of us do, and that relative wants to retaliate against you for something, they can call up a judge, and with no more than a telephone call, they can allege that they think you're dangerous. Without consulting you, the judge can enter an order which will send a SWAT team to your home in the middle of the night. And at that point, all bets are off. There was a gentleman, a 62-year-old gentleman in Ferndale, Maryland, who got that knock on the door at 5:17, Not surprisingly, he went to the door with his gun in his hand. They shot him to death, serving that red flag order. So it's sort of the answer to what would Hitler do. It's being brought to America, and conspicuously, all the states that have red flag laws, let's look at them. South Chicago has a red flag law. How's that working for them? Baltimore does, New York does, California does, and it did nothing to stop the Gilroy shooter. As a matter of fact, if you look at all three of these mass shootings, there was no circumstances to suggest the person would have been red flagged. So it's an effort by the gun control movement to put points on the board, and I assure you, if they're successful in passing this, and we will move heaven and earth to make sure that they don't, but if they are successful in passing this, they will do the happy dance. They will say the Second Amendment movement is dead, and it will, just like Eastern Europe, fell one domino after another. It will be the first domino in the destruction of the Second Amendment.
And that's not hyperbole, is it, Mike?
No, that's not hyperbole. I was the one who predicted if Poland falls, the entire communist bloc will fall. I predict similarly with equal amount of certainty that if it becomes clear that the gun movement is a done deal and that senators can vote for this priority of Bloomberg or that priority of Giffords or that priority of Brady without any repercussions, then at that point we will just face one gun control measure after another. And incidentally, I mean, what is the cause of this cluster of mass shootings? It certainly isn't lack of background checks. All people went through that. It certainly isn't lack of red flag laws. California had one. In fact, it's not lack of gun control at all. There are two reasons why you had these series of shootings. The first is gun-free zones. California is almost a complete gun-free zone, and the Gilroy shooter felt that he could go into this garlic festival without any fear that anyone was going to fire back. In Texas, the shooter traveled 650 miles, as far as he could go without hitting New Mexico, for the purpose of finding someplace where he felt that there was no one who was going to have a gun. And in fact, I mean, we pray that there had been someone that would have had a gun in that huge store and would have been able to fire back before he killed 22 people. And finally, in Dayton, you had a guy who I would be willing to bet, and I could name his name, but I'm not going to. And I would be willing to bet he spent all Saturday watching the wall-to-wall CNN, MSNBC coverage that the El Paso shooter got. And I'd be willing to bet that the El Paso shooter spent days watching the wall-to-wall coverage that the Gilroy shooter got. And so here you had a guy who wanted his 15 minutes of fame, and he understood that in this neighborhood of bars where guns are prohibited, he would have a climate in which civilians wouldn't be armed. And in fact, he bet pretty well there, although he didn't take into consideration the fact that the police might have guns. But you have a cluster of shootings caused by people who wanted their 15 minutes of fame and who saw other people getting attention for mass shootings and decided they were going to do the same.
Our great friend Mike Hammond joining us, Legislative Counsel, Gun Owners of America, on KIDO Talk Radio with Kevin Miller in the morning. Let's go back to the assault weapons ban. Many of the libs, Mike, say that was good and we need to bring it back. Your response?
There were studies on that. The Department of Justice did a study. It determined it had absolutely no impact whatsoever. Certainly no good impact. If you look at shootings like the Sutherland Springs shooting, for instance, that was brought to an end. You ended up with, dozens of people rather than hundreds of people being killed because a guy with a semi-automatic rifle used it in order to stop the shooting. Yeah, if you look at it, anyone who knows anything about guns understands that the difference between what they call assault rifles and any other gun is by and large cosmetic. It has a barrel shroud on it. It has a pistol grip on it. It's by and large a cosmetic difference. And you can bet, as sure as the sun comes up in the morning, that once they succeed in getting rid of 20 million AR-15s and other semi-automatic weapons, and I bet they're going to have a confiscation program to accomplish that. As soon as they get rid of that, the next day they will be back with their legislation to ban handguns, which are, in terms of lethality in these situations, functionally indistinguishable from an AR-15.
Mike Hammond joining us, Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. So how do you see this playing out? You've got Kamala Harris saying that if she's elected, after 100 days, if Congress, quote, doesn't get its act together, she's going to have executive decree taking the guns, taking the weapons, the buyback program, the mandatory program, and she's going to solve all the problems. How chilling is that?
Yeah, well, I don't know what dictatorial banana republic she thinks we have arrived at, but we still have a constitution and we still have a court system. And it's scary that someone who is running for president and who is being taken seriously says, I'm just going to throw out the Constitution and laws and declare myself dictator. But my immediate problem, my immediate concern right now is Donald Trump, making sure he doesn't do something to make himself a one-term president, even vis-a-vis these crazy people who are coming out of the wall in the Democratic Party. The thinking, I think, at the White House is that the way the Democratic primaries shake out will determine the threat to Trump's second term. My own feeling is this, and I've said so in the Washington newspapers this morning, I don't think you can destroy your own base and expect to be elected president with the votes of your worst enemies. I think Trump is in serious danger of engaging in a read my lips moment. And for those of you who don't remember that, George H.W. Bush campaigned for office on the proposition that no new taxes, read my lips. Once he got elected, as a result of the same sort of headlines you're seeing in the newspapers this morning with respect to guns, he was constrained to go back on that promise and make a joke of the fact that he had lied to the American people. Guess what happened as a result of that? George H.W. Bush became a one-termer. Donald Trump is in serious danger of going the same route if he thinks he can specifically now tell us that he's throwing his campaign promises in the wastebasket, that he lied to us, and if he thinks he's going to be able to lose his base in places like the western tier of Pennsylvania, Macomb County, Michigan, the northern part of Wisconsin, if he loses 500,000 gun owners who sit on their hands in those three places, he's a one-term president. He's not going to be elected because the gun grabbers suddenly decide that he's their man.
Mike Hammond joining us, Legislative Council, Gun Owners of America, Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Getting back to that, that was shocking that he talked about being in favor of red flag laws. And that's a very great point when you're talking about the read my lips moment. It's you don't want to get inside somebody's mind. Mike, a two-part question. A, why do you think he did it? And B, the difference between Gun Owners of America and the NRA.
I don't know why he did it. I think he likes to please the person in the room. So back when Parkland happened, he was sitting in a room with Dianne Feinstein, and he endorsed a semi-automatic ban. Now, we had a vote on the semi-automatic ban in the Senate during the Obama administration. There were only 40 senators in a Senate controlled by Democrats. only 40 senators who supported that. So all of a sudden, he's talking in favor of it. I said at the time, and Associated Press reported it. I said at the time that the guy who campaigned as the best friend of the Second Amendment has now become the gun grabber in chief. I mean, if you want to know how to get to Trump, it turned out that Dana Perino and Juan Williams debated my quote on the 5, and within 48 hours, Trump had basically stepped back from all of his gun control demands. So it's possible to get him to see the light, and we're really trying to do that right now. As to the difference between the GOA and NRA, well, we initially, GOA, after Parkland, a whole lot of, quote, conservative voices had said, well, red flag laws are the gun owners' solution to gun control. They're the gun control that even conservatives can accept. Of course, that was ridiculous, but it was a narrative which gained a certain amount of momentum. And so at that point, NRA said, well, we like the idea of red flag laws in theory. We spent a year at GOA educating people on how genuinely insidious these ideas were and how central they were to the gun control movement and how, in fact, they originated from the gun control movement. We succeeded in stopping red flag laws in every state, by and large, except for the blue Democrat-controlled states. And toward the middle of that fight, NRA did, I think, a general 180 on that and fought alongside us in virtually all of those states. So I guess the idea is that NRA sometimes needs to be educated. When you can get them to do the right thing, they can be very good.
Mike Hammond, Gun Owners of America. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right, our great friend Mike Hammond joining us now. You're listening to Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Kevin Miller in the morning at KIDO Talk Radio. And just a brief aside, Mike Hammond is such a good dude, and I covered his race in 1996 for Congress, and I was not a good Kevin Miller to Mike Hammond. And the more we have him on, he ran for Congress in New Hampshire, probably should have won, would be the most conservative person in Congress. And people can blame messaging and all that, but really, Mike Hammond, a great patriot. We're blessed to have him on talking about guns at the highest level. So there you have it. Former Senator Sims, and it's never former because they always have that title, Senator Sims helping fund Solidarity, which brought down the Polish commies and then eventually the entire Soviet Union. Who would have known that happened, that magic happened here from Idaho? Traffic and weather together, KIDO Talk Radio. Let's get you to work safely and on time. Good morning, Dave.
There is no question in my mind that the failure of the United States Congress to act has had a direct impact on the tragedies we've seen. And it is well within the power and certainly the responsibility of the United States Congress to act in the best interest of the safety and well-being of the Americans.
There we have it, our darling President Kamala. Your thoughts, your views, your reviews. Pete Mountain Home, Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning.
Kevin, good morning. A couple things. First of all, the universal background check that gets them going on their universal registration of guns, which is what they want. That's where they are in California. You move to California with guns, you got to register them with the state. And they want them all registered because it's a hard time to confiscate guns until they're all registered. The red flag law business, let me read you a bit of the Fifth Amendment. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentation or indictment of grand jury, et cetera, nor shall any person be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Due process of law means you get a lawyer, you get to confront your accuser, you get to go to court. It doesn't mean your informer can call the KGB or the SS and give your name to them, and they can go kick your door down and take your property, which is what red flag laws are. That's a KGB SS strategy where you have people you don't even know are informing on you, and they come kick your doors down. And if that isn't a violation of the Fifth Amendment, I don't know what is. I think even the ACLU thinks they're awful. Oh, and this government buyback, well, they didn't sell me the gun in the first place, but nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation, which means, let's get an appraisal on every single firearm in America. And what I am asking now for all your listeners to do is go on the U.S. Senate website and email Senators Crapo and Risch and very, very politely ask them or even demand that they agree to filibuster any law that comes out of the Democrat House on gun control, anything. I don't care what it is. There will not be such a thing as any reasonable gun control. Hell, we got 20,000 gun laws already in this country. Okay, you want a reasonable law? Let's get rid of all gun-free zones. I think that'd be reasonable, and that would probably help.
Well, you heard what Mike Hammond said. Hey, couldn't believe that no one in Texas had a gun that would take this guy down. And you saw what happened recently in Missouri. Somebody pulled a gun on him and said, "Look, buddy, put your hands up."
Yeah, well, and you look at that guy in Texas, that killing. Yeah, he didn't like Hispanics, but he titled his manifesto "An Inconvenient Truth." Hello, Al Gore. And you read the thing, you get back into it, and his rationale for killing people is, it sounds like the Green New Deal. It's environmentalism. Well, we're polluting the rivers, we're putting plastic into the oceans, we're doing all this. And the problem in America is there's too many people, so he was going to help solve that by going out and killing a bunch of people. I mean, the guy's a greenie whack. But no, he's a gun owner. We got to go after the legitimate gun owners. But yeah, write your congressman, particularly write your senators and say, I want to filibuster on anything that comes out of this Democratic House. And write President Trump and tell him, hey, don't listen to these people. They aren't voting for you.
Good call, my friend. See you, Pete.
See you. Bye.
Bye-bye. You're listening to Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Good morning, Maggie. Blessed to be with you, Kevin Miller, in the morning at KIDO Talk Radio. More of your phone calls in a minute. We go live to London. That's right, London. From Idaho to London. Simon Owen joining us, Fox News Radio on KIDO Talk Radio. So, a little levity this morning when we're talking about possibly life on Earth that could live on the moon or some other planet. Good morning, Simon.
Morning, Kevin. Yes, this is the strange case of the tardigrade, one of Earth's most resilient species. They can live for decades without food and water. They can survive at massively extreme temperatures. They live in volcanoes and at the bottom of the ocean. And now, potentially, it seems they may live on the moon. Now, the reason they've done this, or they haven't decided to do it themselves, but the reason they've been sent there is it's the work of a man called Nova Spivak. He is an American. He is what he calls, describes himself as a futurist, and he heads up a group called the Arch Mission Foundation based in California. Now, Nova Spivak, and I spoke to him yesterday on the phone from Beijing, he has taken it upon himself to create or attempt to create a backup of planet Earth, a recording of what humans and other life forms on Earth are like, because, he says, it is inevitable that at some point there will be a mass extinction event. He says it's happened multiple times before in Earth's history, and so he's setting about creating this rather unusual backup format. Now, the way he's doing this is he's kind of hitching a ride on space missions. When somebody launches a spacecraft into space, Nova Spivak may well have been phoning them and emailing them in the build-up to try and get some space on board that spacecraft, and that's what happened here. He found out that an Israeli space mission was going up to the moon, and he successfully lobbied the scientists behind that mission to allow him to place a number of things on board, and among them were thousands of tardigrades. I think the one thing I haven't mentioned about tardigrades, Kevin, is they are microscopically small. They're 1/25 of an inch long, roughly. And now, Nova Spivak told me he reckons it's highly likely, after crunching the numbers and trying to calculate what happened with this spacecraft, which crashed on the moon in April, he reckons it's highly likely that these tardigrades have survived and are alive on the moon.
Oh, that's amazing. Of course, how are we ever going to find them?
Well, I mean, they're not really there to be found, because the way they work is that these they can go all these years without sustenance, and then they don't die. They just sort of expel any liquid from their bodies, and then they go into a kind of, he called it a suspended animation, and they can stay like that in theory forever. So his theory is that, maybe in either they get brought back down to Earth and that the atmosphere could allow them to come sort of back to full consciousness, or he says maybe it'll be 30 million years from now and someone will find them. There is this DNA from Earth, this life from Earth that is now up there on the moon. And as I say, when this crashed, it was kind of news at the time when this spacecraft didn't land successfully on the moon. It was a bit of a disaster for the Israelis who sent it up there. But they've spent, at the Arch Mission Foundation in California, they've spent the month since then just trying to calculate what happened with this crash. And one of the theories is not just that the tardigrades survived, because they've looked at the temperatures and that sort of thing. They reckon they could have survived the crash, but also that potentially the bumpy landing means they may be splayed out further across the moon's surface than initially planned.
Well, a welcome break from the Iranians this morning.
Well, I when I spoke to this man yesterday, the man behind all of this, he said he has a kind of a pretty dry sense of humor in the way that he describes this, and he said that there should be at least thousands of tardigrades now in suspended animation on the moon, and he said it's likely the tardigrades are reclining, admiring the view, and starting to wonder when the waiter will bring their nice tropical drinks. And they have this name, tardigrades, but they're also known as moss piglets and water bears.
What will you think of next, Simon?
Hey, nothing to do with me. I just tell you what they're telling me.
Simon Owen, thank you. You have a great weekend, sir.
Thanks, Kevin. You too.
All right. Brian in Nampa with Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Brian.
Hey, Kevin, kudos again, dude. You're doing a great job with all these people on. I appreciate it. Just wanted to say thanks for that. Number two, let's talk about some statistics from the FBI. 2017, because that takes them a couple of years to get them all together and get all the numbers again. We know that assault is something that a person does, but I'm going to use that word like the left does just to prove a point. How many assault knives were there in 2017 that killed somebody?
I don't know.
1,597. Okay. Ready for the next one?
Sure.
How many assault fists and feet killed somebody in 2017?
Got me.
672. Now, assault rifles. Now, that's just not AR-15s. AK-47s, that's bolt-action rifles, that's every kind of rifle ever been made, even muskets, okay? I mean, that's a lot of rifles. How many people were killed in 2017 with assault rifles?
How many?
403. So, I don't understand this. I kind of do, but I don't. Why do people freak out when a guy walks into a store with a rifle on his back? Now, if he's got it in a menacing, position and he's pointing it at people, trust me, I get it. But you're more likely to get killed by somebody walking into Walmart with a knife or with their bare hands and feet. If you've had training, like serious training, like target focus training or jiu-jitsu or something like that, I look at a guy that knows that more scared than I look at a guy with a rifle. And I know that because I've been trained in that. I walk into Bi-Mart and Walmart all the time, and I see concealed weapons all the time because when you're trained, you see them. It doesn't bother me. What bothers me is what the person's body language is doing. If the body language is a little disturbing, you know what I'll do? I'll nicely go up to the guy and go, hey, dude, what's up? And I'm friendly to him, and I talk to him. I see what's going on in their life. I don't draw my gun or pull out my knife and go, hey, what do you got that for? What's going on? That's the wrong approach. The right approach is, hey, dude, what's up? What's happening? Because even if he is a bad guy or a good guy, your approach and your body language to that person is probably going to determine how he reacts to you. And you can defuse the situation just by your approach. So I think we need to, I love what this guy did in Missouri, and I don't agree with people throwing an AR in their backpack and the body armor and taking a camera and walking into a Walmart after it just got shot up. I'm not that.
Well,
I mean,
first of all, what was that guy thinking? What was that guy thinking?
I know what that guy was thinking because I've watched him on YouTube. He's thinking he loves to go push the cops. These guys will go right up next to the cop station, walk on the sidewalk with an AR in their back. And I will tell you, that's the stupidest thing in the world you can do because you can get shot. And if you're stupid enough to walk into a Walmart with an AR on your back right after a shooting, you don't got a brain. It's stupid. But the point being is this, okay? You're more likely to get killed by a knife or somebody's fists and feet than you are a rifle. Now, pistols, they're way up there. So if the left really wants to stop gun violence, okay, if that's their primary focus, they got to go after the pistols first. And they know it. And your GOA guy was right on it. Right on it. What's the difference between the NRA and the GOA? The GOA doesn't compromise. You go talk to anybody on the left and they say they're worse than the NRA. And it's that simple. I mean, we need to stop being scared of death. It comes for us all. You know what kills 60% of Americans? Their diet.
Well, hey,
heart disease and cancer.
Hey, now you're getting sensitive. I got to run, though, Brian. I appreciate it.
Well, I hear you, dude. I'm in the same boat as you.
No, you take care, brother.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. By the way, this just in, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell indicated an assault weapons ban and other gun control measures would be front and center when the Senate reconvenes in September. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.
Texas Congressman Henry Cuellar and 213 members of the House Democratic Caucus wrote a letter to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell urging him to bring his members back from recess to take up a House-passed bipartisan bill expanding background checks. Republican Congressman Peter King told reporters he's confident the measure would pass.
Just do the right thing, let it come to a vote on the Senate floor, and let the chips fall where they may.
So far, Leader McConnell, who's at home in Kentucky, has not signaled he's willing to hold an August session. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
No August session, but when the Senate returns, there will be some issues involving assault weapons bans, gun control in light of the shootings. Now, your thoughts on that are always welcome at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Perhaps Mitch McConnell is doing what Mitch McConnell usually does, and he buys time. He sits back and, well, yeah, we're going to do it. I sound like Foghorn Leghorn, and then just moves on to something else. But Mitch McConnell told NPR from the Courier-Journal that he was basically saying that what can we do to pass something? The urgency is not lost on any of the folks there. McConnell addressed an assault weapons ban, saying we had that ban for about 10 years. There's a good deal of dispute about whether it actually had an impact or not. It's certainly one of the front and center issues. I think probably background checks and red flags will probably lead the discussion, but a lot of other things will come up as well. McConnell stressing background checks would be taken up by the Senate. Now, think about this at 580-5436. In lieu of what Donald Trump said a couple weeks ago, actually a couple days ago, pushing for congressional action on background checks, saying there's a great appetite, and I mean a very strong appetite, for background checks. And I think we can bring up background checks like we never had before. There we have it. By the way, we've had background checks on retail gun sales since 1998. What we're seeing here is an overly emotional reaction to a situation that cannot be solved. In my opinion, the only way you solve it is arming every American, not disarming Americans, not putting Americans in gun-free zones. It is simply naive for anyone to think that disarming America is going to keep us all safe. We see the statistics. We talk to others. The bottom line here is disarming people only helps the bad people and the criminals. Traffic and weather together, KIDO Talk Radio. Kevin Miller in the morning. Good morning, Dave. To the phones we go. We're joined by Tea Party Bob. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Miller. I figured I would call in early this morning, so that I can get down there before it gets hot. I'm not quite sure what Joe Biden was thinking when he was talking about the poor having the same opportunities as anyone else, but it does show me that Joe thinks that he is just no more than a divisive person, and probably even more divisive than the 20-odd-some candidates that are trying to divide this nation. You know, why anyone would vote for this gaff-mobile who has made more dumb remarks than any other presidential candidate in our history is beyond my comprehension. Only in America can someone on the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder rise to the top, and should they have the desire to do so, and I say that from experience. I was once one of those disadvantaged kids who came from the lower end of the economic spectrum. And I will tell you, anyone who will listen, that opportunity abounds in this country if you want to do the hard work. Why do you think we have so many immigrants trying to get into this country? They wouldn't be trying to come here if it wasn't for the opportunities that we offer. Combine that with the freebies we have and give them access to, and you have the worst immigration problem in our history. And I'm really hoping President Trump does not acquiesce to the left when it comes to the red flag laws or restrictions on the types of firearms citizens can legally buy. You know, he is playing with fire when it comes to putting these restrictions on our Second Amendment rights, and it will not serve him well in the 2020 election if he continues to take this route. Besides, this is what he's going to do. The media and the Dems are just waiting to put more pressure on him, and they're hoping to all their dreams will come true, and he is actually going to do something like this because it's going to hurt him in the next election. Now, we all know that more red flag laws are not going to stop the shootings. But I will tell you that if you get rid of the gun-free zones and get more gun owners to carry guns unconcealed, it would do a lot to deter further mass shootings. I carry every place I go, and it's more of a mission to make sure people understand and an impression that you make as you are a rightful gun owner and you can carry any place. And maybe at some point in time, this would deter somebody who is thinking about doing a shooting. You know, if more gun owners need a way to exercise their rights, we might actually have a real deterrent to the shootings that are taking place. And it also might help if people saw more guns and they wouldn't be so afraid of them. And I'm not talking about carrying AR-15s or shotguns. Why do you think that these mass shootings never take place anywhere near a police station or where the police are patrolling?
Or a shooting range. Well, we hope to see you while you're in town.
I'm going to see if I can get down to drop in and say hello, my friend.
Well, give me a call. I'll meet you somewhere for a hot dog.
Will do.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
All right. Wanted to get Jim in Middleton in. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Kevin. Hey, Kevin, they're talking about expanded background checks and so forth. Do you know what that entails? Because we already have background checks on any new firearms purchased in any state in the union. there are exceptions where certain states that you can sell a gun to neighbor, friend, and what have you, as long as they're of lawful age, have the proper credentials, and so forth. But can you share that with us? Do you know what that is?
You know, I think Mike Hammond covered it, and I don't think that we do know, Jim, and we'll continue to seek the truth on that one. Thank you, sir. You have a great day.
Okay, thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Just what are the background checks? Something to look into next. Stay with us.